I now call the May 25th, 2021 meeting of the City of High Point Planning and Zoning Commission to order. My name is Tom Kirkman. I am Chair of the Commission. I will ask the recording secretary to conduct a roll call vote of the commissioners who are in attendance this evening.
Commissioners, when I call your name, please answer present. Mr. Uzak?
Present.
Mr. Kirkman?
Present.
Mr. Moore?
Present.
Mr. Morgan?
Present.
Ms. Swift?
Present.
Mr. Walsh?
Present.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 members present.
Very well, that constitutes a quorum. I want to acknowledge that staff from the Planning and Development Department, Transportation Department, and the City Attorney's Office are in attendance to provide technical and professional assistance to the Commission this evening. Before we move on to tonight's agenda, we will consider the minutes from our regular April 27th, 2021 meeting of the Commission. Are there any questions or corrections or comments to the minutes as they've been presented to us? If not, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
I'll move to recommend approval of the minutes of the April 27th meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Very well.
Second.
Commissioner Zuzak has made a motion to approve the minutes as have been presented. Commissioner Swift has seconded that motion. I'll ask the recording secretary to take a roll call vote.
Commissioners, when I call your name, please answer yes or no in response to the motion to approve the April 27th, 2021 minutes. Mr. Uzak?
Yes.
Mr. Kirkman?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Ms. Swift?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 votes in favor of that motion.
Very well. By a vote of 6-0, the minutes of April 27th, 2021 have been approved as presented. Before we begin our public hearing this evening, on behalf of the Commission, I would like to welcome everyone. The Commission is charged with reviewing and making recommendations to the City Council on a variety of development applications and on plans and policies for the city. The Commission has final decision-making authority for street name change applications. Our review includes conducting a public hearing to obtain additional information and/or comments that could be important in evaluating the item. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting restrictions on public gatherings, this Commission is meeting remotely in accordance with state law. This has necessitated some changes to our normal meeting procedure, which I will take just a moment to explain. There are 6 commissioners present at City Hall this evening. Items on the agenda will be heard as normal, with a member of city staff presenting a summary of each application, followed by the staff's recommendation. The applicant and those assisting the applicant and all who are attending the meeting remotely will then be given an opportunity to present information in support of the item. Planning and Development staff published and sent notices that solicited the public to provide comments on these items by email, phone, or letter. The period for public comment on these items will extend for 24 hours beyond the conclusion of tonight's hearings. For that reason, the Commission will not be voting on any hearing item on tonight's agenda. Instead, this meeting will be recessed to Thursday, May 27th at 6:00 p.m. This will allow the Commission members to further discuss any additional information or comments that are submitted by the public before making an official recommendation to the City Council. With that, we will move to the first item on tonight's agenda, Classic Dye Stuff Incorporated, Zoning Map Amendment 21-07. Mr. Shannon.
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Planning and Zoning Commission members. For those members of the public who are listening, my name is Herb Shannon. I'm a senior planner with the City of High Point Planning Department, and I will be providing a summary of this item this evening. Our first item, let's see, we're having an issue here. Our first agenda item is zoning map amendment case 21-01. This is a request to rezone a 3.4 acre tract of land from the current light industrial or LI district to a conditional zoning heavy industrial or CZHI district. The first slide is a general large scale map of the city. You can see those 2 areas highlighted in red along the I-74 corridor. That is the general location of the site. And this is a larger scale map. Those areas highlighted in that bluish teal colors where you have the site designation or the zoning sites in question. The site is located east of the intersection of Brentwood Street and Gavin Drive and west of the northern terminus of New Street. And that's just a larger scale map identifying that area. Now, the applicant operates an existing minor manufacturing facility at 301 Brentwood Street. On the map that is displayed for you, that's that area where you see that HI directly to the north and west of where you have the zoning site. That is 301 Brentwood. I believe we can quickly highlight that. That's 301 Brentwood right there. And they desire to expand their facility onto the budding lands to the east and south of their facility. The applicant, Classic Dye Stuff, processes powdered dyes, pigment dispersions, and hand sanitizers and disinfectant chemicals. They do specialty packing of their processed products in different size containers, and the whole existing operation is classified by the development ordinance as a minor manufacturing use, which is a permitted use in both the light industrial and heavy industrial zoning district. They have requested to rezone these abutting parcels along New Street and directly to the south along Brentwood for proposed expansion of their facility. Their current facility is approximately 40,000 square feet, and they're looking at doubling that size of their facility. They have included with this application a conditional zoning ordinance in which they've offered conditions to limit allowable heavy industrial uses and for development to meet the LI district standards. The planning department has classified the current use of the property as minor manufacturing. And based upon the information provided by the applicant, we have determined that their proposed expansion of their operation would also be considered a minor manufacturing use. And that use is permitted in both the light industrial and heavy industrial zoning districts. However, the applicant has expressed concerns that future planning staff may interpret their proposed use differently and consider it a major manufacturing use, which is only permitted in the HI district. Therefore, they have submitted this application to rezone to a conditional zoning heavy industrial district to allow major manufacturing uses on these abutting properties. They've also noted that as part of a possible future manufacturing process, the materials considered toxic by the FDA may be used. Thus, they propose that their conditional zoning ordinance also allow the wholesaling of toxic chemicals or substances, pesticides or fertilizer. That's a specific use type in the development ordinance. I would note that simply using a product that may deem to be toxic in the manufacturing process doesn't mean that it falls under that toxic chemical substance. And that information has been relayed to the applicant that simply using that in their processing application doesn't mean they fall into that category. If all activities are inside and they're meeting all the standards of the manufacturing use, it would just be considered a minor manufacturing use. This next slide shows the adopted land use map for this portion of the city. You can see the zoning site as identified in the map is in an area that the land use plan identifies as light industrial. Those lands along the east side of Brentwood Street from East Martin Luther King Jr. Drive south to Wade Place are all designated by the land use plan as light industrial. And except for the applicant's existing manufacturing facility, all lands along this east side of Brentwood have a light industrial zoning designation. Lands along the opposite side of Brentwood Street are designated by the land use plan as low-density residential. Those are those areas highlighted in yellow. And there's some moderate and medium-density residential where there are some existing multifamily developments. I believe our IT department is just doing something to make sure you're aware of that area I'm speaking of. Just to follow up, those lands along the opposite side, that west side of Brentwood, where you see that yellow, that's low density residential, kind of the oranges is moderate density residential, and that darker brown, medium density residential, those are areas where you may have some multifamily development. Due to the long established land use and zoning pattern, the expansion of heavy industrial uses in this area is not supported by land use policies for this portion of the city. Some key points that staff would like to note from the staff analysis section are as follows. First, compatibility with the surrounding area. The applicant has offered a condition to the development on the site to only LI district uses and 2 HI district uses, that is the major manufacturing and the wholesale trade of toxic chemicals. To address compatibility with adjacent uses, the applicants offer conditions that development meet LI district standards. This requires that any outdoor storage area be screened from view from adjacent lots and from the public streets, and prohibit outdoor manufacturing, processing, and assembly. With any conditional zoning application, part of the evaluation is minimizing or mitigate any adverse effect on adjacent uses. The land use plan and zoning patterns support light industrial uses in this area lying east of Brentwood Street and residential on the opposite side. The requested conditional zoning heavy industrial district allows heavy industrial uses that may be large scale, have extensive movement of vehicle, materials, and goods, and greater potential for adverse environmental and visual impacts to nearby residents. Another key factor that is part of our evaluation is have there been any changes in policy in the area and the development pattern. There have been no changes in the city's policies in this area to support expansion of heavy industrial zoning. And goal number 2 and 5 of the land use plan speaks to promoting an urban growth pattern that occurs in an orderly fashion and to encourage development that enhances and preserves residential neighborhoods. As a condition, the request to expand HI district zoning in this area designated by the land use plan for light industrial does not promote an orderly development pattern or adequately protect adjacent neighborhoods, and approval could encourage additional heavy industrial requests in this area. Therefore, the Planning and Development Department is recommending denial of this request because the zoning of adjacent property is not required to support the proposed expansion. Included in our staff report is a consistency statement and reasonableness statement for your consideration. The statements note that the request is not consistent with adopted policy guidance because the goal of the land use plan is to encourage development that enhances and preserves established neighborhoods, and major manufacturing and wholesale trade of toxic chemicals as allowed in the requested conditional zoning heavy industrial district does not enhance or protect the adjacent neighborhood. Such use should not be allowed within the proximity of nearby residents without adequate protection. Furthermore, the request is not reasonable in the public interest because the rezoning is not necessary to allow the proposed expansion as described. As always, the commission must place in official record a statement of consistency. That statement in the staff report is available for your consideration, or the commission may adopt its own statement. That is a brief summary of this request. Are there any questions of staff at this time?
Mr. Shannon, it appears to me what the applicant is looking for is some sort of a safeguard against a change in interpretation by the staff. Let's just say that were to happen. What's the next step? I mean, would planning and development staff go into this facility and say, okay, we've changed the interpretation of what constitutes minor industrial. You got to stop doing this. I mean, could that happen, or would some accommodation be made to allow them to continue doing what they were doing?
Staff has noted to the applicant that if they have that concern, we have a process called a code confirmation request where tell us what you're proposing to do. Staff will evaluate it and respond back in writing a determination, and we offer that proposed process to the applicant. In such a situation, we would say, this is how we classify you. Well, then they have something in writing from the city. So if there's ever any questions, you can say, hey, I have this in writing from prior staff, and I relied on that. So that becomes somewhat of a binding document. Unless they're proposing something different, they have that document that they can note, I went to the city and they determined this is my use, I'm still doing the same thing.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Shannon? Thank you very much. Is the applicant present with us this evening? Perhaps remotely? Apparently not.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, we're here. I'm sorry, we
Yes,
were
sir.
having trouble unmuting ourselves here. Can you hear us?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the time this evening. This is Grant Allman with the White Early Law Firm, here with my partner, Andy Harris. We've also got Tom Pica, who's the president of Classic Dye Stuff here with us as well. We'd like to thank, if we could, the planning staff for their work in this process. I'd like to start with giving you a little bit of background about Classic. I know there's some information in the materials, but I think it's important to touch on a couple things. Classic Dye Stuff's been in business in High Point since 1979, and they've operate at the 301 Brentwood site, as we're seeing on the map, which is zoned high industrial. That's a roughly 5-acre parcel there. The primary business of Classic Dye Stuffs is paint, dye, colorants in their various forms, coatings, and disinfectants. Classic's been a long-term community partner and supporter of the city of High Point. They've operated their business responsibly and been a good neighbor, as demonstrated by only positive response to our community meeting. And of course, as you've seen, Classic is fortunate in the need to expand their business. They've run out of space, essentially. They're looking at the prospect of a new facility on the sites included in the application of roughly 40,000 square feet. That investment could require up to a $5 million expense in connection with this new facility. And in order to feel comfortable with this kind of investment, Classic requires some consistency in the zoning, because as you see, with the primary site being high industrial, the building may straddle the property lines, and we feel that it's important to have consistency across those lines. So I think what's important, the essence of our application comes down to 2 points, which we've talked about a little bit, but we want to delve into a little deeper. The first is that we respectfully disagree with the staff's interpretation as our current operation being a minor manufacturing operation. Classic Dye Stuffs is a major manufacturing operation as that's defined in the development ordinance. The development ordinance specifically identifies paint and coating manufacturer as examples of major manufacturing. So although Classic has done and will continue to do a good job of limiting noise, dust, odor, and traffic impacts, I think the development ordinance clearly identifies paint and coating manufacturer as major manufacturing, which again are only permitted in an high industrial district. Second issue relates to the hazardous material classification, and that I think it sounds slightly ominous, but again, what we're doing is primarily in response to the COVID pandemic. Classic was one of the businesses in High Point that responded to demand for specialty cleaning products, and that business has grown substantially and likely will continue to do so. Some of the material that Classic uses, obviously alcohol is one component of sanitizers, but there are other components that are considered pesticides by the FDA. And as we saw in the development ordinance, pesticides are what's included in this definition of hazardous substances that again requires a high industrial classification. And as we stand now, all of these activities are occurring at the current high industrial site. So we're not looking to change what's already happening in this neighborhood. It's just an expansion of that operation onto the adjacent parcels.
Yes, sir. As I understand it, from what Mr. Shannon presented, what you're doing in your current facility can be done in the light industrial district. There is no prohibition against doing what you're doing now. Do you propose to do more or something different than what you're doing in your current location that would absolutely require the city to move to a conditional heavy industrial district?
I think the answer to that is that we do not have plans to change the operation and what we're doing, but obviously, this is a growing, evolving business that is responding to customer demand. So there's not an expectation to change the line of products that we are doing. But again, we've got protection in our current operation and being high industrial, where we feel that the development ordinance specifically categorizes our primary business enterprises as requiring high industrial use. I understand and respect the planning staff's opinion, but again, the clear language in the development ordinance identifies paint and coating manufacturer as major manufacturing.
Okay. Any other commissioners have any questions for Mr. Arnold, the applicant? I want to ask Mr. Shannon to come back up just for a second. Somewhere in here, I don't have it at my fingertips, I believe the city addressed the issue of a paint coatings manufacturer, and it said that it doesn't require heavy industrial for how they're going about this. Is that correct?
Yes, when staff first began interacting with the applicant as far as their proposed expansion, we asked them to submit in writing what exactly you're proposing. Staff reviewed that in detail and determined it's not just a list on the principal use table, it's also how you're operating. And I think we included on page 3 of the staff report the definition of minor manufacturing and minor manufacturing. The manner in which they have noted they're operating, everything's indoors, there's no smoke, there's no odor, there's no outdoor processing, that this would be considered a minor manufacturing use. But I believe on page 3 in that second paragraph, we specifically, for the public and your information, here's how the development orders define a minor manufacturing and a major manufacturing use. And what they explained to us, yes, they're doing this activity, but everything is indoors. When you drive by, you wouldn't know what's going on. There's, except for some storage, which is permitted in a light industrial district. Everything is inside, and we interpret that as a minor manufacturing activity.
Okay. All right, well, let's see here. We did not receive any public comments on this issue, I don't believe, city. Very well. Let's let the commissioners deliberate, discuss this for a moment if they like to, if they have anything.
Oh, Commissioner Moore, so is that fair if the applicant is still there, that there won't be any outdoor activity such that, is that your understanding that that would be consistent with the current use?
From what I understand, if they continue doing what they're doing now, high industrial zoning is not required. And I think what the applicant is concerned about, they want a safeguard so that at some point in time, if the city were to decide to change the interpretation of what you can do in a minor light industrial area changes, they won't suddenly be out of luck. Now, from what Mr. Shannon told us, they would have some recourse because they could say, well, this is what we're proposing to change, or if the city goes to them,
Sure.
you can't, I don't think you can just pull the rug out from under them.
Correct. I mean, that could change for anything, right? For any use.
Right.
For any zoning consideration.
May we
Mr.
speak to
Burnett
that for just a
addressed
second?
this.
Yeah, if I can maybe give a little bit of background, and a lot of this comes from the changing of the development ordinance
of the prior development ordinance to the new development ordinance. The previously, everything in the prior development ordinance was based on SIC codes. Wasn't based on land use impact, was based on what your classification was. So if you were a chemical manufacturer, you fell into this SIC code. If you were a bread manufacturer, you fell into this SIC code. And from there, that determined whether you were light industrial or heavy industrial. Well, the one thing, you know, that the city learned through that process for 25 years that it had that operation, that ordinance from us, was that didn't necessarily measure impacts of operation. That particularly as processes and manufacturing processes change over time, they become cleaner, they become smoke-free, they become vibration-free, things of that nature. And so when the new ordinance was put forth, one of the big criticisms that our staff had was that often we would find an industrial use that would come before us and say, we're clean, we do this, we do that. But because your SIC code classifies you as this, I fall into the heavy industrial category. So we wanted more flexibility with the ordinance. And so therefore, there was this criteria-based. The consultant that we worked with developed a criteria-based sort of definition, if you will. And if you're not producing, if you're contained within your box, so to speak, and you're not producing smoke and fumes and that type of thing. So if you're a Valspar, if you will, that may have smoke and fumes that go beyond your property line as a paint operation, then you would be heavy industrial. But if you're a dye manufacturer or a processor that does not have smoke and fumes that go beyond your property line, then you're not going to fall into that heavy industrial or that major manufacturing category. Now, while that may seem more of an interpretive approach, it does add flexibility to our ordinance, and it enables us to cite industries in more than one zoning district, depending on how they operate. And, you know, to answer the question, you know, once they are in, once they're permitted, they're in. They're permitted. So once you go into a location, you know, there is no provision unless you, you know, drastically change your operational process to where you start producing smoke and fumes and that type of thing. So I hope that answers the question.
Just to be clear, just because I'm trying to look at this from the applicant's viewpoint, they're going to spend this money to buy this property, and they just don't want somebody from the city to walk in a year, 5 years, 10 years from now and say, well, we've changed our interpretation. You got to stop doing this. I mean, that's not going to happen. You're saying,
Well, they already own this property. So
Right.
this is not property they're looking to buy. This is property
Right,
that
but
they own, but looking to expand.
If they expand
Correct.
their current operation, and they're doing just what we talked about. And
Correct.
right now, it is compatible with the light industrial district, which is the current zoning.
Correct.
Even if the city, at some point, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, says, okay, we're changing our interpretation of what's allowed under light industrial, I'm assuming nobody from the city can go into Classic Dye Stuff and say, hey, on this piece of property, you can't do this anymore.
Well, we really can't change our interpretation. We can
Okay.
change our ordinance, okay? One thing that 160D does is if we make a determination, and what Herb was talking about previously was a code confirmation. Once we set forth in writing that this use falls into this use category, and we put that to writing, then we are bound by that. Now, that is an appealable determination, as anything is. It's appealable to the Board of Adjustment that an aggrieved party, somebody that would be impacted by that decision, which could be the owner of the property or could be an abutting property owner, could appeal that to the Board of Adjustment and say the staff is incorrect and here's why, and would have to argue that before the board, and the board would have to determine that the staff was incorrect in whatever manner and say, no, this is really a heavy industrial use or major manufacturing use rather than light industrial use. But once that decision is made and we go beyond the appeal period, we are bound by it. 160D requires that, you know, use determinations be made in writing and that we are bound by them until such time the ordinance is changed. So.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Burnett? Very well, here's what we'll do. I'm going to close the public hearing on this item for now and ask the commission members, please review any public comments received on this item in the ensuing 24 hours. Staff will forward those to you by email if they do come in. And we'll give further consideration and make a recommendation for this request at our recess meeting on Thursday beginning at 6:00 p.m. Second item on tonight's agenda, High Point University and the City of High Point, street name change 21-01.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Herb Shannon again. This is a request for a street name change, street name case 2101. Application was submitted by High Point University to change the name of East Hartley Drive to North University Parkway. In conjunction with this, there is also a part of this is a renaming of West Hartley Drive from West Hartley Drive to Hartley Drive. The proposed length of the length of East Hartley Drive is approximately 1.8 mile, and the length of West Hartley Drive is approximately 1 mile. And the first overhead projection shows how that thoroughfare runs through the city. Hartley Drive and University Parkway, that thoroughfare extends about 6.5 miles within the city limits. And the university campus fronts along a portion of North University Parkway, and that's highlighted on this presentation map. This major thoroughfare has several street names within the High Point city limits. And from the south northwards, at South Main Street, it is South University Parkway. That changes from South University Parkway to North University Parkway at East Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. And from there, from East Martin Luther King Jr. Drive northward to East Chester Drive, it's North University Parkway. At East Chester Drive, that quarter changes to East Hartley Drive, and then when it goes to North Main Street and crosses North Main Street, it is West Hartley Drive. Although the university just requested the East Hartley Drive renaming of this thoroughfare, West Hartley Drive must be included. The city's street naming and addressing policy notes that when you have a roadway that crosses Main Street, you have an east-west designation. So if that East Hartley designation is changed, then that West Hartley designation must be, either the west must be removed or a new name proposed. That is why that is part of this application. There are about 60 properties abutting East Hartley Drive and West Hartley Drive, with 20 of these parcels being impacted in a manner in which their street name or their street name and address is required to be changed. This presentation, the area highlighted in red, this slide, is East Hartley Drive. Those areas or parcels that you see shaded in red, those are lands where the address are going to be required to change. There are some additional areas, but those are either situations where you have a corner lot. When there's a corner lot situation, an address is assigned to both streets. But like, for example, you have the former Barnes & Noble, which is now I believe that the art school. That's addressed off of East Chester, but our mapping addressing system notes also a Hartley address in case there's ever any redevelopment. We didn't get into that level of detail. We just wanted to focus on who's actually going to be impacted now. So you see those areas highlighted in red. Those are the property owners that are going to be impacted. Due to the difference along East Hartley Drive in the addressing pattern, there's one set of addressing patterns for East-West Street, another set of addressing pattern for North-South Street. The street address will need to be changed to prevent a situation when you have two blocks with the same addressing. Also, you have the even odds are different with the north, south, east, west. So to make sure we have a consistent addressing and not have duplicate addressing, those properties are going to have their address changed. And if you had a chance to evaluate the staff report, there is a church at that intersection of Johnson Street and East Hartley. You have an existing medical facility, the Pinnacle Bank Insurance Office, and you have some other lands at that intersection owned by the county, by the city, that's associated for our regional stormwater control device that are impacted. There's also some common area associated with this homeowners association here. None of the actual residents in that in that development change, just that common area. But those areas highlighted in red are lands that will have to have their address along with the street name change. As far as the West Hartley Drive portion, that's the area that's noted in green on this presentation. The proposal is just to remove that west prefix. The addresses can remain the same. and property that are impacted is the YMCA and some adjacent land they loan that, where they have some trails that's undeveloped. You have 2 apartment complex and a nursing or assisted living facility. But those parcels that are highlighted in green are those lands that would be impacted. Once again, street number stays the same, just that the proposals for that west prefix to be removed and it just be noted as Hartley Drive. Now, in preparation for this public hearing, mailed notices were sent to all abutting property owners along this corridor, whether you're addressed off it or not. If you abut that corridor, staff sent a mailed notice advertising this public hearing to those property owners, and there was also a legal advertisement in a newspaper. With a street naming request, the development order states that the Planning and Zoning Commission may approve of requests subject to the applicant demonstrating the findings that are outlined in your staff report, and I'll just briefly go over that. The first finding is that the street name changes in accordance with the city's street name and address assignment. This major thoroughfare changes 4 times within the city limits. This would reduce the number of name changes. You would end up with majority of this corridor. Let me just go back to the previous slide. From South Main Street to North Main Street, of course, you have that north-south designation, but a majority of this corridor would be under one name. And the request promotes the goals and objectives of the street name policy as it will provide for more consistency in the naming of this thoroughfare. Another finding for your consideration is that the street name change will serve the public interest by enhancing public safety. The staff had noted compliance to the request reduces the number of street names along this thoroughfare. Also, a finding for your consideration is that the request not adversely affect the value or cause excessive economic impacts to landowners or to the city. It's generally an overall public good to promote consistency in street name. However, there will be impacts on those abutting property owners that I previously highlighted, those various businesses and apartment complex from this request. And finally, that the street name change will result in an overall public good that generally cannot be measured in monetary terms, but that is found to outweigh known or perceived economic interest or cost. Once again, it's generally an overall good policy to have a consistent street naming along a thoroughfare. However, there will be some short-term impacts on those affected property owners as far as changing up appropriate mailing address and other items associated with this business with this change. Staff is recommending approval of this request with a delayed effective date. Now, the development ordinance requires an effective date at least 45 days from the date of approval if this commission makes that determination. However, the ordinance does allow the ability to have a longer time period of up to 1 year to assist businesses and affected landowners in preparing for the change. Due to the need to allow businesses and those residents of the apartment complex to be notified and to prepare for the change, staff is recommending for the commission's consideration an effective date not until January 1st of 2022. That is a brief summary of this request. Just a reminder, with a street naming application, this commission does make the final decision. Are there any questions of staff at this time?
Have there been any, I don't think there have been, but just to be clear, have there been any objections from any of the affected property owners? I know we've actually got some notations from several property owners who are endorsing this.
At this time, I have not received any phone calls, and I have not been made aware of any objections from abutting property owners. I would just refer to our recording secretary. Have we received any information as of today from anyone?
Okay. We'll have until Thursday if there are any.
Okay.
It's also my understanding that on this request, High Point University and City of High Point are co-applicants. Is that how we should perhaps look at this? In other words, it says 1/2 total sign replacement cost. Would that be something the university is going to pick up?
That was part of their application fee.
Okay.
So they've already paid that as part of their application fee.
Okay. Well, unless anyone has any other questions.
I have a few.
Very well. Chair recognizes Commissioner Morgan.
How many roads are we affecting here? Is this Hartley Drive all the way through, or am I missing something? The red from,
Currently, that University Parkway name,
right?
South University, North University, goes from South Main to East Chester Drive.
So that's, okay.
So that's it. If you start off to the south, you have the red South University Parkway, that kind of teal color North University Parkway up to East Chester Drive.
So what is the name of East Hartley Drive on this map right now, today?
East Hartley Drive. And that is from East Chester Drive to North Main Street.
And so what is it, what is West Hartley Drive today?
West Hartley Drive today. Now, what the applicant's proposing, that area that's noted as East Hartley Drive,
Uh-huh.
they're requesting that to be renamed to North University Parkway, continuing that name up to North Main Street.
All right, I missed
And because of the street naming policy, you're crossing, that Hartley Drive name crosses North Main Street. If East Hartley Drive is changed, then something must be done with that West Hartley portion, whether a new name or you're just removing the West prefix, because if East goes away, you don't need to note West.
Does that make sense?
It does now. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Shannon? Thank you, sir. Is the co-applicant here? Is anyone from High Point University here that would like to speak? I'll assume not.
Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
yes, I can. Go ahead.
Good evening. This is Lindsay Ayers, representing High Point University at 1 University Parkway, High Point 27268. Thank you, and we ask for your support of this application, submitted to change East Hartley, as Mr. Shannon explained, to University Parkway. Basically, our request for extending University Parkway along this corridor reflects continued university pride throughout our city in an area where the university owns much of the property already. Because High Point University attracts 100,000 plus visitors to High Point each year, benefiting our economy, it provides a more seamless access to campus for guests traveling from out of state. It is a change that makes sense. We had an overwhelming amount of support from property owners on East Hartley that approved our request by signing the application, as Mr. Shannon mentioned. These property owners, again, included Pinnacle Financial Partners, Wake Forest Health Network, the Journey Church, used to be the Journey Church, which is now the Way Church, a different property owner. We received signatures from both of those properties, and also the city of High Point. In addition to the support of property owners on East Hartley, we also have a signed letter of support from the CEO of Hartley Drive YMCA, Lynn Lomax. That Hartley Drive YMCA is located at 150 West Hartley Drive, beyond Main Street, where the name change would end. We certainly appreciate your consideration of this application. We would ask for your consideration for the effective date to being as soon as possible with respect to the property owners and allowing us time for them to change their address. And I am most certainly happy to help with that process and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the co-applicant? If not, we will move into deliberation by the commission. I'll just say that I think it's entirely reasonable, and frankly, I think it's a little confusing when the same street carries more than one name. As far as affecting property owners, there's been no objections. What I see in the report, the cost for the sign changes is minimal. I don't have a lot of personal objections to it. I don't know how the other commissioners feel.
Makes sense to me.
Makes sense to me.
Okay. Well, what we'll do then, we'll close the public hearing on this item for this evening, and the commissioners can take into consideration any other comments we may receive from the public between now and when we reconvene on Thursday evening at 6 o'clock. We will move to third item on tonight's agenda, John Ritner, zoning map amendment 21-09.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Herb Shannon with the City of High Point Planning and Development Department. And your next public hearing item is zoning map amendment 2109. a request to rezone a 51-acre tract located east of Westchester Drive, approximately 1,500 feet south of Phillips Avenue. You may be familiar with this tract of land. It was the former mall. It currently has a zoning designation of conditional use planned development mix, and the applicant is requesting a rezone to a planned development core city district. This site and its various outparcel was initially developed in the late 1960s. The current conditional use planned development mix district was established in 1998 to allow expansion to add on the assisted living facility at the southern portion of the site. And there have been other expansions of the allowable uses in 2003 and 2006. The applicant is requesting to update the previously approved PUD district to once again expand allowable uses. And specifically is requesting to allow a minor manufacturing use within the, as allowable use within the zoning district. With the adoption of the current development ordinance, that previous conditional use plan development mixed district no longer exists. It's gone away. However, any land that had that prior zoning approval, those uses that were previously approved can still operate, and they're vested under that prior approval. The only time where it may cause an issue where rezoning would be required if a new use or applicant wishes to expand allowable uses, and that's what's happening. The applicant is proposing to expand the allowable uses of this planned development to add minor manufacturing. And because that previous CU PDM district is no longer part of the development ordinance, they are requesting rezoning to the planned development core city district, as this site is within the core city. The planned development core city district is established to provide a flexible means of accommodating high-density mixed development within an urban character of the core city. On this zoning request, the various uses and standards from the previous conditional use planned development district are being transferred over into a new planned development CC district. The only changes are as follows. First, we're updating the terminology to match the current language of the development ordinance. Adding the applicant's proposed new use, they've noted that in their application to allow minor manufacturing, however, they've offered conditions that would limit such a use to a maximum of 5,000 square feet per establishment, and that there be no outdoor activity. Key items to note from the findings in the staff analysis: this request is consistent with the planned development district standards. As far as compatibility with the surrounding area, everything that was allowed before can continue. It's just that one new use. So previously, compatibility findings are still in effect. There is a residential development along the opposite side of Westchester Drive. However, those uses are buffered from this commercial use by those commercial uses. You have a funeral home, a medical office, a church, and a new police station buffer that residential neighborhood from this commercial development. And there's an abutting commercial shopping center use to the north, park and cemetery to the south. There is a residential neighborhood to the south, but as you can see from the overhead projection, the southern part of this site has been developed with an assisted living facility and nursing facility, and that is a compatible use next to that abutting residential neighborhood to the south. There's no change as far as in the track layout, no change in the access point, and that current mixture of commercial and life care uses to the south ensures compatibility. And the request to allow this one additional use with the condition that it's only 5,000 square feet per establishment, so it's not allowing a large-scale manufacturing use, and that everything be with indoors, no outdoor activity, will ensure compatibility. Therefore, staff is recommending approval of this request to rezone this 51-acre site to a planned development CC district. We do offer for your consideration the consistency statement that the request is consistent with adopted policy guidance, because as conditioned, the requested PDCC district does not conflict with the institutional land use designation of this area or with adopted policy guidance. Furthermore, the request is reasonable in the public interest, as the request is to update the old planned development district to a new planned development CC district and add one small-scale type use to allowable uses in its mixed-use development. That is a brief summary of this request. Are there any questions of staff at this time?
Any questions for Mr. Shannon?
Yes.
Chair recognizes Commissioner Uzak.
It says that the minor manufacturing would be limited to a maximum area of 5,000 square feet per establishment,
Yes.
but there's no limit on the number of establishments?
No. There could be multiple minor manufacturing uses as long as they do not exceed the 5,000 square foot limit and that all activities occur within the building.
Okay, but it seems like having one of those in this area is a lot different than having 10 of those in this area.
I think the key factor as far as ensuring compatibility and limiting impact is that 5,000 square foot area. That's going to limit the intensity of development to make sure that it is consistent with the character of the area.
Do you have an idea of something that would represent, that would be this sort of thing, that would be 5,000
I
square?
believe the applicant can give you some idea of what they're proposing, but very briefly, he's looking at a food processing type facility where they are cooking up meals, taking out the moisture, dehydrating them, and then selling them. Because he wants to do some wholesaling out of that activity, that's what's kicking him into the minor manufacturing. If it was just straight retail customers coming in, that's permitted under current zoning. It's that wholesaling activity that they're looking to do that is requiring that minor manufacturing component, but I believe the applicant can give you more detail on that.
Anything else for Mr. Shannon? Thank you, sir. Is the applicant present?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. Yeah, my name is John Ritner. I started this business with my brother in Missoula, Montana, called Pinnacle Foods Co. We produce and sell freeze-dried meals, so like for backpacking or camping or hunting or something like that. And just recently, I boomeranged back to High Point, where I spent most of my life and grew up. And I moved into this kitchen on Westchester in the old Providence Place Mall that was formerly Canterbury's restaurant. And it has been empty for the last 12 years. They haven't been able to fill this space for a variety of reasons. So I moved in here to what we do is we cook full meals from scratch, using good quality, as local as we can ingredients, and then we load them into these small freeze-dried machines that don't have any exhaust or any, nothing coming out of the building from that. They're small electric machines that remove all the moisture from the food. So the food comes out totally dry. We package it in airtight pouches, and it's totally shelf stable because all the moisture has been removed. It can sit on your counter for 10 years and you just add boiling water to the bag and reconstitutes and you can eat it anywhere. So previously we were just selling retail in Montana, and in coming here, we wanted to break into the wholesale aspect of business. We don't have a storefront. We never have. All of our sales are done online. We're currently a really small business. It's just my brother and I. And so yeah, that's the purpose of this request, is that our 3,200 square foot kitchen, that we can sell freeze-dried meals wholesale. We didn't realize that it would be viewed as minor manufacturing, but that's fine, and here we are, and we're excited to break into this aspect of business and hopefully grow the business to a couple employees and the positive impact on the community.
Very well. Are there any questions for Mr. Ritner? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Any discussions from the commissioners regarding this? Comments, questions? In that case, I will close the public hearing on this item and ask the commission members to review any public comments they may receive before we reconvene on Thursday evening at 6 p.m. Next item on tonight's agenda is Hunter Farms Zoning Map Amendment 21-10.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This is a request to rezone a 0.92 or just under 1 acre tract of land located east of North Main Street at the southwest corner of Irbywood Drive and Montgomery Street. If you're not familiar with those street names, if you're traveling north on North Main Street, if you've had the opportunity to pass to O'Reilly Auto Parts, this site is right behind that. The zoning site is part of the larger Hunter Farms and manufacturing facility with fronts along North Main Street between Irbywood Drive and East Dayton Street. Tax records note that this facility, also noted as the Harris Teeter Creamery, was built in the late 1940s, and until establishment of the Main Street zoning district in 2008, lands along this portion of North Main Street had a general business zoning designation. The northern portion of the zoning site, and just see if I can get my arrow working, this area right here. And as I talk about this request, I'm going to mention Montgomery Street. That is this street right here. But the northern portion of the zoning site, kind of where you see the GB, was rezoned, and I believe that was in 1998, to construct an employee's parking lot. And there were specific conditions regarding screening when that was approved in 1998. The southern portion of this site currently has a residential single-family 5, or R5 district zoning. It was previously developed with a single-family home. That home has since been demolished and is now owned by the applicant. And they are proposing to expand their employees' parking lot to include that area. Thus, they have requested this zoning request to a conditional zoning office institutional district to allow expansion of that employee parking lot. And that proposed CZOI district would be on the northern portion of the site that is currently conditional use general business that was rezoned in 1998 for employee parking. It would include that abutting parcel to the south, which is right here, that's currently R5. So the application is for all that area you see highlighted in that teal color to be rezoned to the conditional zoning OI district. Included with this application is a conditional zoning ordinance in which the applicants offer conditions to prohibit some of the uses allowed, mainly the minor retail sales use. That is a permitted use in the OI district. The applicants offered a condition that that be a prohibited use. And they've also offered conditions to preserve perimeter vegetation and to screen any parking and to restrict access. Key points to note from the staff report are analysis regarding compatibility. Based on the limited area of this site being under an acre, conditions offered by the applicant as far as allowable uses of the proposed CZOI district will be of a limited scale. So as always, yes, the applicant notes they want to do a parking lot, but staff always look at what are all the uses that could be permitted. If for some reason another use goes in there, based upon the limited size of the site, staff has determined that would be of a limited scale and intensity that would still be compatible with the surrounding area, as there are some existing single-family homes across the street from the site. Also, the proposed expansion of the employee parking lot will continue the previously established conditions, where they're going to continue a condition that they're going to screen the parking lot area with a fence and preserve any existing landscaping along the street frontage. As far as mitigation of impact, the condition offered by the applicant, they've offered to close their existing access point to the parking lot. Currently, access is from Montgomery Street right here. So traffic for those employees, they come along Irbywood, turn on Montgomery and access here. The applicant has offered a condition to eliminate that access point and that all access will be from Irbywood, and that will limit the amount of intrusion of any traffic into that residential area. They've also offered, as I previously noted, they're going to preserve the landscaping for the street yard, screen the parking, and prohibit retail uses. All those will assist in mitigating any type of impact. A key point I would like to note is the changes in this area. This request kind of is the last continuation of a long-term, slow-moving change of this block. That area that is currently zone R5, this lot right here, that's the last parcel in this block between Irbywood and East Dayton to the south that is non-residential. Over the years, We've had the abandonment of the southern two-thirds of Montgomery Street, so this was a public street. In 2008, it was abandoned, so that is now part of the Hunter Farms facility. And there was also a rezoning request to allow expansion of that manufacturing activity to the rear. So this is kind of the last part of, from between Irbywood and North Main Street and along the former Montgomery Street, the conversion of the area from residential to non-residential. I would also note that the request promotes a preferred development pattern, with this being the last residential zone parcel on this block being rezoned from residential to non-residential. Thus, the Planning and Development Department is recommending approval of the request to rezone this 0.92 acre area to a conditional zoning office institutional district. As conditioned, the request will be compatible with the surrounding area and in conformance with adopted plans. Staff finds that the request is consistent with adopted policy guidance because the requested conditional zoning district provides a transition between the manufacturing use and adjacent residents. And the request is reasonable and in the public interest because the requested zoning change includes the last residential zone parcel in this block and downzones the commercial zone portion. And just to explain the downzoning from conditional use general business to conditional zoning office institutional. Downzones the commercially zoned portion of the site to a district that provides a better protection for the adjoining neighborhood. That is a brief summary of this request. Are there any questions of staff at this time?
Questions for Mr. Shannon? Thank you, sir. Is the applicant with us this evening?
This is Sam Losine. I'm an attorney. I represent Hunter Farms on this application. And I thank Mr. Shannon for his summary. Essentially, Hunter Farms just needs additional parking for its employees. The business has continued to grow and new hires have been added. So we just need more parking for the business. And as Mr. Shannon said, we're going to limit access just from Irbywood, close off the Montgomery Street access, construct fencing and landscaping to shield the parking lot from the residential lots that are across the street. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
You did have a citizen information meeting?
We did, and we did not have any citizen participation. The owner of the pizza, the Sir Pizza property, had gotten a notice. He called after the citizen meeting and just asked if the rezoning impacted his property.
Okay.
Of course, it does not. He's a little bit further down Main Street next to the bicycle toy and hobby shop.
Right. Okay, any questions from the commissioners for the applicant? Nothing? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'm going to close the public hearing on this item. The only comment I'm going to make is it seems like it's a reasonable request, and the applicant has offered so many conditions, nobody objects. So I'll leave it there unless anybody else has anything they want to discuss. In that case, we will revisit this on Thursday evening, beginning at 6:00 p.m.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Final item on tonight's agenda is City of High Point zoning map amendment 21-11.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Herb Shannon once again. Your final item is a continuation of the Comprehensive Zoning Map Amendment Project zoning case 2111. This is a request by the City of High Point to rezone 91 properties totaling approximately 25 acres as part of the Comprehensive Zoning Map Amendment Project, Amendment Project. And for those members of the public who may be listening, this is a multi-year project the city is working on to review and evaluate the zoning of land throughout the city, identifying areas where the zoning is out of sync with the existing use of land or inconsistent with current land use policy, and propose appropriate changes in zoning for the area. For this evening, we have 2 residential subdivisions for your consideration. Noted in the staff report, they're in the central portion of the city, north of East Lexington Avenue. And there is the Arbor subdivision, a townhome development off of Geyer Street, and the Ashton Woods subdivision, and 2 abutting parcels. that are proposed for rezoning. In regards to the Arbor subdivision, this is it consists of 20 townhome dwellings and 1 single-family dwelling. This property received zoning approval in 1983 to establish the conditional use for residential multifamily 16 district. There was a condition as to density, but the site is fully developed, and upon development, the applicant has met that condition. Thus, the request is to remove that conditional use designation and just, instead of being conditional use, residential multifamily 16, be rezoned to the RM16 district. This rezoning would not impact any deed restrictions that the homeowners associations may have. So staff is recommending approval to rezone the Arbor subdivision from conditional use RM16 to the RM16 district. The second portion of this request is the Ashton Woods subdivision. This is a single-family subdivision that received zoning approval in 1984. The conditions regarding that were met. There was also a condition on density that was met at the time this project was developed. It includes some abutting land. We note in the staff report that along with the subdivision, which is highlighted, the lands to the north of the subdivision, 1935 Wickham Avenue. As part of the subdivision process, that land was dedicated to the city of High Point for assistance in completing the Greenway Trail, and the trail actually goes through that property currently. Also, at the northern terminus of Wickham Avenue, there were 2 parcels that were outside of this subdivision. That was 2106 and 2108 Wickham Avenue. That area, those 2 lots, one is 7,000 square feet, one is 9,000 square feet. It developed with single-family dwellings. Due to the fact that they're single-family dwellings and a limited size where you really couldn't put anything of any intensity on that site, staff is recommending those 2 lots be rezoned from RM16 to R5 to match the manner in which they have developed. And so staff is recommending approval that the Ashton Woods subdivision and 1935 Wickham Avenue be rezoned from conditional use R5 district to the R5 district, and recommending that the 2 parcels 2108 and 2106 Wickham Avenue be rezoned from RM16 to the R5 district. Staff received about 35 phone calls from adjacent property owners. Just a refresher, staff sends out an early notice that just to gain input from the applicants, from the property owners, and notify them what's going on. That was sent out in February, and then we did our regular public hearing notices. Between both those notices, we received about 35 phone calls. Once it was explained what was going on, there were no objections. The main questions was, is this going to increase my taxes? There were concerns from a townhome development about, will this impact our deed restrictions and so forth. But once it was explained, the proposal, and it wouldn't change your taxes, doesn't change your deed restrictions, there were no objections. That's a brief summary. Are there any questions of staff at this time?
Any questions for Mr. Shannon? Thank you, sir. Any discussion from the commissioners? Any comments, questions? In that case, I'll close the public hearing on this item. Commissioner members are asked to review any public comments subsequently received on this item between now and Thursday night, when we'll give further consideration and we'll make a recommendation at the recess meeting at 6:00 p.m. I want to remind members of the public that may be listening this evening that there are 3 ways that you may submit comments on any of the requests that we presented this evening: by email to build@highpointnc.gov. You may call 336-883-3522 and leave a message, or you can drop off written comments in either of the High Point utility drop boxes, which are located on both sides of the municipal building, that's City Hall, 211 South Hamilton Street, either in the Green Drive or Commerce Avenue parking lots. Please be sure to include the case number on any comments so we can apply these to the correct case. All comments must be received by the end of the day tomorrow, Wednesday, May 26th. And as a reminder to the commissioners, we will be discussing and making recommendations on all 5 of these requests when we reconvene on Thursday evening. Now we'll move on to new business.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Planning Commissioners. Chris Andrews with the Planning and Development Department. Your new business item tonight is presentation of amendments to your rules of procedure. There's a memo that contains those amendments within your agenda packet. These amendments are chiefly necessitated by the recent text amendments to the development ordinance that you considered at your April meeting that were related to Chapter 160D of the state's general statutes, which were actually, that text amendment was adopted by City Council last week. After drafting these amendments, the amendments to the rules of procedure, planning staff provided them to our legal department for review as well. And legal did also propose some changes, so there's a combination of things that were necessitated by 160D, as well as some clarifying amendments that legal recommended. Since this list of amendments is pretty short, I'll give just a quick explanation of each and whether it's related to 160D or it's proposed by our legal department. So within the packet, if you're following along, there's an amendment to Section 2, which is the kind of the general governing statutes that apply to the commission. There are just some statute references in there that need to change, as well as description of how public records are available to the public. Within the membership section, which is 3.1, there's the requirement that's inserted that new board members must take an oath, or that requires that commission members take an oath, so that's being clearly communicated. Section 3.1.2 discusses your ETJ member. And there's just a statute reference in there that needs to change. The next two amendments, which are Section 5.2.2 and 5.2.3, those are describing how the commission conducts business. Those are two clarifications that are from the legal department about no commitment to your prior review of items, and then deliberation and forming a decision prior to the meeting. Probably the most substantive of all the changes, and this aligns with the text amendment from last month, is the conflict of interest section. This mirrors exactly what was in the text amendment, but this gives some clarification as to what the close familial relationships are, and those are defined within state statutes. So that's another 160D required amendment. There's also some wordsmithing in there related to the tense of some of the words. But then the next two items are section 5.3.1 and 5.4.2, and those are two more items that were added from our legal department after their review. And this is talking about recusal and then some of the procedural motions. One last one. Oh, no, that was all. That was all 8. So not very substantive, but wanted to give the commission a breakdown as to which ones are being, are following the 160D amendments, and then which ones are just giving some further clarification. These amendments are presented to you tonight for discussion, if there's any questions, and then within the rules of procedure, after hearing them tonight, they would be voted upon by the commission at your next meeting. If there's any questions related to these amendments, I am happy to answer any questions, or if there's anything for legal. That is all, Mr. Chair.
Commission recognizes Chairman Commissioner Morgan.
Legally, the definition between shall and should.
Yeah, so, shall is for quasi-judicial boards. You all are not quasi-judicial. That would be the HPC and the Board of Adjustment. So the shall language was a little inappropriate. Obviously, it's best practice, and we recommend that you never did that, but it's not something that's required by law because you're not a quasi-judicial board. So we absolutely recommend you do that practice, but in the event that somebody didn't do it, there's a difference in violation if it's shall versus should. And like we said, or like I said, if you were a quasi-judicial board, it would be shall.
I understand about the quasi-judicial, but it seems like we're watering something down.
No, we're trying to protect you so that you wouldn't have any exposures in case you accidentally violate that. It's not something that you're required to do under law. You are if you are on a quasi-judicial
So is there a consequence of doing it once you've changed it to should?
So again, if you had accidentally or inadvertently or in some way
Let's say it wasn't accidental.
had a taken a public position, well, again, this isn't something that's required. So how can I say that another way? If you were a board that you were acting as an actual decision maker, you're not, this is a legislative administrative
Understand.
function where you're only making a recommendation. So this is actually to protect board members. So if you violated this when it said shall, it would be a much bigger issue from both an optics standpoint, from a liability standpoint, for your role on the board. Should is something that we believe it's the best practice, and we're specifically making it this level because it's not something that's required by law. So we wouldn't want to hold you to a level that you could get yourself into trouble with if it's not something that's required. You're in a different function here than you are when you're a quasi-judicial board.
I understand that, and I appreciate protection, but I just,
Is it fair to say that when you use the word should in a legal sense, it's binding, shall is binding, should is not?
That's correct.
that's why I'm trying to figure out what is the consequence of doing this when it only says should. There is no consequence?
You would be potentially violating, I guess, just kind of general rules of conduct of how you should conduct yourself. But, it is a recommendation in the way that you should, when you take your ethical training, understand that you should come here and hear everything that we have to say and not come with a preconceived notion or an opinion about it. But because you're not acting as a quasi-judicial adjudicator, it's not something that's required by law.
But if it was intentional and egregious over and over again, there is process
Absolutely.
to remove someone from the
Yeah,
board, so you just would follow
And
that
your
process.
fellow board members could take issue with you for it.
Correct.
And if I just may add that, with a should in there, that's advisory and guidance, you are subject to removal of violating conduct by the city council. So if it is something that is a repetitive thing that happens on a general scenario where there's an egregious violation, it would allow council to review
Correct.
that position, so.
Yeah, so exactly like Commissioner Moore said, there are other options if you're violating any ethical standards. But it's our recommendation, your attorney's recommendation, that there's no need for the word shall there due to the role that you sit on the board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
So we don't screw something up.
Is any other new business? Not, we'll move to the director's report.
Okay, have just a few things to go over. You have at your next meeting, you've got another one of the comprehensive zoning map amendments. In fact, that's the only zoning case that is on the agenda for your June meeting, and I'll talk a little more about the June meeting in just a minute. Just to give you a little bit of an update, the Eastchester Drive and the Jamestown Bypass land use assessments were approved by City Council at their last meeting. You will be seeing some implementation of that over the next number of months. There'll be some land use plan changes, amendments that'll come forward to the commission and eventually the City Council from both those assessments, as well as with the Jamestown bypass assessment, some street name changes. That will probably occur over a period of time, given some of the road construction timing of that impact, and to try to tie in with the road construction timing. And then also there'll be some zoning initiated with the Jamestown bypass as well, so based on those recommendations. So you'll be seeing the implementation of that over a number of months. Likewise, City Council also at their last meeting approved the amendments to 160D. Currently, staff, we're working on a Part 150 update assessment. That's the noise compatibility study that's done for the airport, in which the city's airport overlay zoning district is based upon. It's anticipated that'll be presented to you at your next meeting as well, at the June meeting, with any kind of recommended changes in the city's airport overlay zoning district. And then, as Chris already mentioned, the rules of procedure. The other thing that I'd like to put on your agenda for June, if we can work it in time, is to do a training session with the commission, since we've only got one zoning item and a presentation on the airport assessment. It would be an opportune time to sort of go through a variety of different topics with the commission, some that y'all have mentioned to me in passing over a period of time, and the things that I've made notes on. It may warrant more than, there may be enough on the agenda, so to speak, from a training topic list to warrant another training session afterwards, not to go too long and overburden the commission. So possibly either your July meeting, or if we are in the same format of meetings, maybe even at your Thursday meeting, your recess meeting on Thursday in June as well. So first, if it's okay, I'll go ahead and at least put it on for the June regular meeting, and then we can see how it goes. And if there's additional time needed for some of these topics, we can either add it on to your Thursday meeting if you'd like, if we're still meeting on Tuesdays and Thursdays, or onto your meeting in July.
I think we ought to do it, when the opportunity presents itself. So if the opportunity is there for June, we only have one item.
Yeah.
Just wanted to let you know that I heard that I believe will be all in person next month.
Well, that's why I figured it might happen, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think that we'll be back to the normal format of just one meeting where we can vote, and we don't have to hold open the public hearing for public comment.
So that will probably be a June, July type setting.
If that happens, will we go back to meeting in Fishbowl for the dinner session?
Likely, we'll find all that out when that happens.
You gonna start cooking?
No.
One step at a time, one step at a time. And then the last thing, just to mention, passing, we have ordered tablets for the commission. And so we, like I said before, we will work with the commission members on that. We'll roll those out and do some duality, if you will, of having electronic as well as paper copies for a period of time to make sure we've worked out any kind of snafu or issues before we sort of transpire all, at least try to transpire all to all electric on the agendas and that type of thing. So, any questions on anything?
If there's nothing else, I will move for a recess until Thursday evening at 6 o'clock and ask well, I guess we need a second.
Second.
Commissioner Wallace has seconded the motion for a recess, so I'll ask the recording secretary to take a roll call vote.
Commissioners, when I call your name, please answer yes or no in response to the motion to recess until Thursday, May 27th at 6 p.m. in City Council chambers. Mr. Uzak.
Yes.
Mr. Kirkman.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Ms. Swift.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 votes in favor of that motion.
Very well. I vote of 6-0. We are in recess until Thursday evening, May 27th at 6 o'clock.